Hope you can see the slides now.
Yeah, slides are okay, fine. Mr. Satyanarayan will kickstart the meeting. Basically, he will welcome and then the introductory remarks. Then we can.
Is it okay, sir? We'll be able to start off?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
We are waiting for some more to join in, or is it okay, Mr. Mohan?
I think already we are 5 minutes. Maybe shall we wait for another 2 or 3 minutes?
There may be a couple of minutes, people. There will be some time difference also over there.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Mr. Dave, can we start?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. Dr. Badri, can we start?
Sure, Vishnu. Can start. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Heads of CSI, ACW, IEEE, Mr. Sakthivel, Mr. P.V. Subramanian, Mr. Mohan, Dr. Badri. Good evening to Dr. Badri. It's very nice of you to have accepted to speak, though it is late in the evening for you. And once again, members of office bearers and members of Hindustan Chamber of Commerce, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome all of you for this webinar on how digitally it will be helpful or the economy would be helpful for revival after COVID-19. It is, of course, a couple of years back, if in case we used to say that the colleges and the schools would be run on computers or smartphones, you would have laughed at them. Yes, COVID pandemic and the lockdown has changed so much that everything is happening over the mobile phones or the smartphones or the laptops right now. Of course, digital platform changing over of bankings and everything had changed on a couple of years back, and it is, I think, most 90% of the banking activities are through online platforms only, and I'm sure this is going to take off post-COVID times. And how it is going to help us will be highlighted about Dr. Badri. So I don't want to take much of your time. With this, I welcome each one and all of you for this. And I leave the floor open for others, the virtual floor open, and Dr. Badri will be able to explain a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dave. I'm thankful to Mr. Mohan and
Yeah,
Mr.
1
Dave
minute.
and everyone.
Dr. Badri, previous, would you like to do the formal introduction, speaker?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Please go ahead.
Good morning, friends. Good morning, friends. Dr. Badri Narayanan is an economist focusing on a variety of quantitative, economic, and interdisciplinary models to analyze a wide range of economic, mainly international trade, environmental, energy, and public health policies. He is widely known for his contribution to develop the Global Trade Analysis Project, dataset and model extensions at Purdue University. He has informed the process of decision making in several major economic policies such as free trade agreements, technology regulations, etc., both through his academic research and consulting advisory projects. He is also engaged with startup community across the world as an advisor and co-founder. He is the founder and director of Infinite Sum Modeling, a management consulting firm which has its presence all over the world with registered offices in Canada, USA, India, and China. He is currently affiliated with the School of Environmental and Forestry Sciences in University of Washington, Seattle. He has developed computable general equilibrium (CGE), econometric and network science modeling for India, South Asia, and rest of the world to understand the economic implications of several cross-cutting. Badri is also a senior fellow, European Center for Economic International Political Economy, Brussels, and Center for Social and Economic Progress, formerly Brookings, India, New Delhi. He has been a consultant at several organizations such as Google, McKinsey, KPMG, PwC, World Bank, UN, ADB, Harvard University, LSE, etc. He has published over 100 papers and 5 books in reputed journals such as Nature Communications, Energy Economics, Network and Spatial Economics, Economic Modeling, Applied Economics, Agricultural Economics, etc., and presented his work in over 30 countries across the world. Over to Dr. Badri. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Subramanian. And I also thank Mr. Mohan and Mr. Dave for introducing me, inviting me to do this presentation webinar. So I'm going to talk about some analysis I've done recently on how would the global economy recover from COVID, including India, through digital transformation. So this is some work I did along with a colleague from Asian Development Bank, Mr. James Villafiate. And I'll be mainly focusing on drawing on from this work, and I'll also talk a little more based on my general observations and experience on this topic. So in Asia in general, so the work we did with Asian Development Bank, so we looked at the various applications of digital platforms. It could be e-commerce, online travel, advertising technology, transportation services, digital media, e-services, education, and all these things. And we have estimated the market for Asia relative to the world. So if you take, for example, e-commerce, Asia is more than 50% of the world, mainly because India and China are here. And there are also other larger countries that are present here. So there are many of these applications. Even before COVID started, there are so many tenets of life and economy where digital platforms have been a major drivers, and we can also see their sizes. They're so big in general. There are a wide range of things. Typically, the digital platforms are used for mainly to. One example is to matching the buyer with the seller. So that's a digital intermediation platform, like Uber or various other platforms that have come up with linking the buyer with the seller. Then there is also an aspect of monetary transaction, and there is also another aspect of data exchanging data between sellers, buyers, and also among people. So for all these things, you need digital platforms, and basically we can say that the entire digital platform competition is focused in Asia. So globally, there are many companies, but the market size in Asia is so big. So the competition is focused in these countries, Asian countries, and the number of users are, it's already large and it's growing further. And there is a lot more potential to grow in Asia. If you take India in particular, we have this Digital India program, and after the advent of free, low cost data services, data network, mobile network, and so on. So it has become such a common thing in India. So even relatively poorer people have access to mobile data, and also the penetration of different Indian languages in the mobile applications, that has led to kind of democratization of use of these technologies. A lot of people, even people who are not that very educated, who are focused on their vernaculars, the local languages, they're able to make use of all these new technologies. And there is also a high level of concentration. There are just a bunch of major tech companies that develop these platforms. They're kind of highly concentrated, and within Asia and in different countries, the penetration has been to different extents. So India has relatively high level of penetration compared to many other countries. But when you compare with countries that are similar kind of economic income or growth similar to India, they are kind of similar. They have similar level of penetration. So what we do is we use a model. It's called dynamic GTAP model. So Global Trade Analysis Project. So Mr. P.V. Subramanian was mentioning about some work I have done in this area. So this is, you can think of this model as a kind of a framework that captures various transactions in the global economy. So, for example, as a consumer, let's say we are a regional household, we are a household and we represent a country's household. We spend on products, we go to the market, buy products, and the products can be domestic or imported. The products can come from the domestic firms, or they can be imported from other countries, from the rest of the world. Similarly, the local governments, they purchase products and services, goods and services, either from the domestic firms or they can also import. And similarly, the households, we provide labor, land, capital, and resources to these are called factor markets. And we provide these to the firms, and firms pay money for that. So we get factor payments like salaries, capital income, and so on. And whatever is left out after spending for commodities at the households and spending for the government, whatever is left out is a savings. And that savings is converted into investment, and that investment is added back to the industry. So industry takes the investment and expands its production further. So this is basically the kind of very simplified representation of the model. So I didn't want to make it like an economic presentation. So I'm just giving you a high level idea on how it works. And the rest of the world, so imagine this is India. All these things are happening in India. And you can think of this as rest of the world, all the other countries. So likewise, for every country, you have this kind of a graph, and you have all the other countries, individual countries coming here in place of rest of the world. And that companies can export and they can import. And there is something called intermediate inputs. So in order to produce cars, you need steel. And so steel is an intermediate input to produce car. And that steel can either be a car company, for example, Tata Motors can buy steel from Tata Steel, or it can buy steel from Chorus from Europe, Chorus Steel from Europe. So, so that would be imported intermediates. So you have these two choices for the companies also. We have this kind of choices for different organizations. So you have this kind of a model. It has data behind it, and it also has a model behind it. And the model is kind of a system of nonlinear equations. There are many equations that are solved simultaneously to get the solution. So now we use this model, and what we do is one major gap in many of these data sets is that the digital platform sector is not a separate sector. So we have a sector called communication services, which digital sector is a small part of that. So we did a lot of data work to identify how much is the digital sector, what is the extent of size of digital sector in different countries. And secondly, what we do is we look at from 2020 until 2025. There are two aspects when you think about digital sector, digital platforms, and all this digitalization. One is the expansion of the sector itself. So during COVID, we see that many of the digital companies have expanded manifold. They have expanded their operations quite a bit. So we did some calculations and found it is likely to be something like 20% growth by 2025 on top of what is predicted so far. So whatever, like if the growth was, uh, if you have a business as usual kind of growth, what we call as baseline growth, whatever growth that may happen, let us say that is 10%. Now the growth will be 30%. Because of the boost that we are witnessing today and that we expect to sustain in the next few years. So that is the first aspect. The second aspect is productivity. So when digitalization happens, three things happen. The first thing is the sector itself expands, the digital sector expands. That's what we say here. It grows by 20%. Second thing that happens is uh, to the extent that digital sector grows, the non-digital sector may shrink a little bit. That is the second thing that happens. There is some kind of displacement. So because digital sector grows, and if it grows, let's say all the tech companies are growing a lot. If they grow, they're going to absorb a lot of labor. They're going to use a lot of labor from the market, and there is only limited. Let's say you take let's take Tamil Nadu for example. In Tamil Nadu, we have so many engineering colleges, and there are a lot of students who study different disciplines like mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and so on. And if the digital sector grows a lot, what might happen is that all the students from all the different engineering disciplines will be attracted towards IT or all the digital companies. So what happens to the traditional manufacturing companies? What happens to other industries that are not that digitally intensive? They don't have that much of digital intensity, digital focus. So there is going to be some kind of shrinkage because they'll have to pay higher wages to employ the same graduates. They have to pay more money, and that will affect their bottom line. Their cost will increase, and their price may increase, and their output may get reduced. That is one aspect. Second aspect is they can also shrink because the during COVID, many of us we did not go to physical stores. We did not go to malls. We did not go to restaurants. We did not go to tourist locations or tourist places, hotels. So all these industries at the end of the sector a little bit. So that is the second aspect. Aspect I highlight here is that the use of digital technology is a higher level of productivity. What we call as TFP is basically total factor productivity. So every activity that uses digital platforms is going to be more productive. So we looked at some literature and we found that because of the digital technologies, if you look at, for example, the e-commerce, the way e-commerce has transformed the markets in the past, we see from various papers that there are two effects. One is the prices fall. Why do the prices fall? Because the customers are able to access the market at from their computer. They can, or from their mobile phone, and the information is disseminating very fast, very rapidly. So basically, the companies, if the companies have, in the traditional setting, many people, like for example, if I live in a particular neighborhood and I want to buy, some, let's say, some vegetables, and if I just go to my nearest market, there may be some vendor. I'll go and pay him the money. Whatever he asks, I'll pay, or maybe I'll do a little bit of bargaining negotiation, and I would buy and get back home. But I may not know that there is probably another vendor, maybe 5-6 streets away, who may be selling the same vegetables at maybe 10-20% lower than this guy. So since I don't know that option exists, I'm kind of paying more money. So now with the digital technology, you can compare everything. You can see who is selling at what price, and you can choose the cheapest guy and you can buy from him. So that means there is a price reduction effect because of digital platforms. The second is there is also an efficiency increase effect. So a lot of things that you spend a lot of time doing, you have to take your car and or pick a taxi or your motorcycle and go somewhere and buy something. Instead of that, you just the click of a button, you order something, it comes to your home. So you save a lot of time, and that time probably you can engage in some other activity, some productive activity. So that way your productivity can increase. So these estimates, we found them to be around 1% a year. So with this kind of growth, like 20% growth in the digital sector, we may expect something around like 5 to 6% productivity growth. So that's something we also estimated. Now, given I've explained whatever assumptions we make and so on. So now I'll come to some kind of results. So what we did was, as I told you, what if the digital sector grows by 20% from 20 to 25? So that x-axis 20%. So basically, in $1 trillion denomination, you can see that 25, the digital sector would grow from something like $5 trillion to $6 trillion. So without this expansion, it would have stayed at $5 trillion. With the expansion, with the additional expansion we are talking about, it goes up to $6 trillion globally. If you talk about Asia, currently, without these expansions, without the accelerated digitalization, we stay at 1.5% and $1.5 trillion. And with all the digitalization, we are going to end up at 1.84 trillion US dollars in terms of the digital sector size. So it's almost 1/3 of the global digital sector size. So that's what we get. So that's kind of one aspect. So this is kind of some technical explanation on how. So we have to have a baseline. So whatever I show here, the green bars here and the red bars here, these are what is called as baseline. So that is kind of the business as usual. And the blue bars here and the yellow or orange bars here, those are the baseline plus the additional scenario of digitalization. So that's what we explain here. And now I come to the GDP effect. because that's quite important to look into. So we look at something like for the whole world, we look at the GDP growing up to something like $89 trillion in today's constant prices, and and we already accounted for a major slump in world GDP in the year 2020 due to COVID, and after that there is some recovery and we reached something like $89 trillion. But with the digitalization, we can grow much higher to $96 trillion. Similarly, if you just look at Asia, instead of $34 trillion, we could have gone to $37 trillion. So the delta, the difference, the additional GDP gain we get is around $2.8 trillion. So that is quite significant. It's quite high. We can look at individual regions, and basically our most interesting region is this South Asia. Basically, that's India. So it's India. We mentioned in South Asia, but it's basically India. And for India, we are looking at something like $500 billion gain by 2025. So $500 billion, which is like $500 billion gain in GDP, which is a big number, because if you remember, India's GDP today is around 2.8, $2.9 trillion. By 2025, it's going to be our previous target was $5 trillion, but it's probably at least going to be something like $3.5 trillion. And of $3.5 trillion, $500 billion additional gain can come from digital economy. So it's around close to 13%, 14% increase in GDP that is coming out of the digital sector expansion. So it's a huge gain we are talking about. Now the question is it all going to happen magically? How, where on earth will all this happen? Like who is going to pay for it? How is it going to work out? So what we also looked into was the investment required. How much investment is required to get this kind of gains? So if we look at South Asia, basically India, we're looking at something like $15 billion investment. So if you invest around $15 billion, your gain is actually something like $500 billion. So it's a huge gain. So you're putting in only so much investment, but the gain is much higher because there is a lot of what we call as multiplier effect. So you put in this investment, so the digital sector expands. When the digital sector expands, there is a productivity that expands, and directly the expansion of digital sector that already provides a lot of jobs. A lot of people earn more income, and that is going to contribute to the economy positively. And as I mentioned, we also capture what is called as cannibalization. So because of the expansion of the digital sector, some shrinkage of the traditional sectors happens, and that is also captured in the model. But even then, we see a pretty positive expansion. Employment. So employment is another thing that we always worry about. We typically think that the digital expansion actually leads to loss of jobs, and that's actually true to some extent. It is true that some people are going to lose their jobs, or maybe a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, but many of them are going to find new jobs if the governments invest in skill development programs. If the governments can invest in the people, they can accelerate the training programs. The major problem we see in countries like India in particular, I've seen this very closely, is that we see that the labor is quite kind of there is a simultaneous problem of excess surplus labor. There are a lot of people who are looking for jobs, and a lot of companies are looking for people to be employed. So you have this problem where you have excess surplus and excess demand at the same time, which is a very, very strange situation. Why is it happening? That's because of the skill gap. So that already happened. Even in the past, it has happened in India. And now with the digital expansion, it is going to happen at a much larger scale than we can ever anticipate. So unless there are concerted efforts by the industry, the academia, and industry associations like I think Hindustan Chamber also can play a wonderful role here to bring everyone together and find out the skills that are most important for the people. Like when you think about digital sector, I think the things like mobile app development, artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, Internet of Things, 5G technology, big data analytics, all these new technologies. You don't need people who only think of these as buzzwords, but you need to have people who are architects, who are technical, programmers, and people who are really knowledgeable about these things. So that's quite important. If you don't have that, then we're going to have an employment issue. But what we did was to see how would this employment problem be. So we see that for the world, the employment is mostly going to increase globally because many of the developed countries, they have pretty positive programs to employ these people and so on. Skill development programs and so on. So that's good. Um, in Asia also, it's slightly it's not bad. But if you look at countries like China and US, the difference is small. There is gain. There is going to be gain, but the difference is relatively small. There's not going to be huge employment generation. So imagine we are talking about something like 10%, 5%, 10% higher GDP, but employment growth is quite small compared to that. So the worry that a lot of people have, that we may witness what is called as jobless growth. There's going to be huge growth, but the jobs growth is going to be smaller. That is something that we also see in all these figures. And if you can look at South Asia, basically India, you also see that there will be like 40 million more jobs coming from this, and that is around 6.5% increase in employment. So 6.5% increase in employment for something like 15% increase in GDP, which means that, like, typically if we didn't have this kind of technological development, 15% increase in GDP might probably mean 15% increase in employment. But because of the automation, the increase in efficiency and so on, we only witness 6.5% growth in employment for a 15% growth in GDP. So that is the point where we realize that there is some job issue here, but that has to be taken care of by proper skill development. And another aspect is looking at trade, the global trade. Here again, there are substantial gains that we see in these countries. And if you look at India, we look at something like $208 billion more trade, which is around 15% increase in trade. So the trade kind of scales up as much as GDP. So GDP for India increase by 15%, and trade also can increase by 15%. So trade here is both exports and imports. We're going to export more and import more. So here, one word of caution is that if you take a technology like 3D printing, and when you combine 3D printing with cloud computing, cloud services, Internet of Things, and so on, you actually don't have to do a lot of exporting and importing. Why? Because if you have raw materials, if you have plastics, sometimes if you have steel, even if you have wood in some cases, there are 3D printing machines that are available to manufacture, actually print goods, 3D structures for all these kind of materials. So the trade will happen only in those kind of raw materials. The finished goods are going to be manufactured using all these different 3D printing machines. So that is one thing to remember, and that might actually affect the growth that we are seeing in trade. We did not actually particularly capture that effect. We did not particularly capture how much trade can be affected because of 3D printing, because 3D printing is part of all these disruptive technologies, but we mainly focused on the other digital technologies. But if you take that into account, we may not see this much of a growth in trade. It may be smaller. I've seen a report by ING Bank, which basically says that trade can actually potentially fall by 30% by 2030 because of 3D printing, and because of the reasons that I just mentioned. So there is no necessity to export or import if you are doing 3D printing. So the coming to the challenges, the different that exist with respect to digital platforms. The first thing is they're highly concentrated. There are only a few companies that focus on them. If you take digital platform industry, there are only a bunch of companies, and there is a lot of privacy and security concerns. We all are right now following what is happening with the news on WhatsApp and a lot of other alternatives coming, and actually that in some ways there is also getting back to the concentration problem. So 1 and 2 are kind of related. And the third thing is they also might contribute to insecure work arrangements. We may not the work you need a lot of personal trust for a boss to allow a team member to work remotely. Fortunately, we are seeing a lot of positive thing there on that aspect, but it might be difficult, and also the security aspect, even the cyber security aspect may be difficult. Then the fourth aspect is cyber security, basically cyber crime and identity theft. These are major issue. For example, recently we saw some discussion by a leading journalist about in India about her offer from Harvard University and so on. So there are such things which we have to be very vigilant about. Then number 5 is base erosion and profit shifting is a rising concern. So this is a very interesting point. I talked about trade at the end. The trade thing, I'll give you one example. In the 90s or 80s, if people in India who are fans of Michael Jackson, if they want to listen to his songs, albums, what would they do? They would just order. Probably there will be some way to buy their audio cassettes or video cassettes, VCR or maybe CD or floppy disk or whatever, depending on which year we were in. And that would have literally crossed the border from US to India. And when it crosses the border, you basically see that they go through the customs, right? And the custom duties are paid. But what is happening now? If you want to listen to Michael Jackson, we just go to YouTube and it's live streaming. So that whole base, the tax base is eroded. So if you think about the government is losing all those custom duties that are being paid that way. So that is eroded. And the next thing is also the profit shifting. So we have a lot of like what we say in India, we call them as Kirana stores. And with the advent of companies like Amazon and Flipkart and so on, so many of them are under threat. So we may not go to the Kirana store and buy something small. We may just, at the convenience of a mouse, we'll just click something and buy something from these companies. So the profits may shift from the large number of people to one or two large firms. But there are counterpoints to both of these things. Both of the points I mentioned. One, for base erosion, what people say. In fact, I have done some work on it to say that if you think about how much more demand has happened, like because of all these new ways of doing things, people have become more prosperous because of all these YouTube ads or even the whole company, the whole Google infrastructure has led to a lot of software companies, and a lot of people are prosperous, and that is leading to a lot of economy, and people are paying income taxes. So whatever you are paying as custom duties, much more than that has been earned now as income taxes. And now, if you are going back to that era and imposing duties on YouTube videos and so on, then that is going to lead to fewer people watching this, demand falling, and that may lead to other catastrophic effects. Similarly, for profit shifting, the idea is, if you look at Mr. Jeff Bezos, he has been actively promoting the concept that Amazon is helping a lot of small companies, small traders, and so on. We may believe it or not, but there are both kinds of things happening. Some of the small players. I mean, largely speaking, many small players are getting affected, but some of them are being absorbed by this new industry, the new big tech industry. So there are pros and cons here. Then the e-readiness is a major issue. Like in a country like India, I already told that we have pretty good penetration, but we do have a lot of people who do not have good internet connection and so on. So I think that was really exposed when we did the schools went online. We did some studies on this. We did some studies on during pandemic when the schools went online, schools and colleges went online. We did a primary survey looking at the responses to questionnaires from a wide range of both students and teachers. And we found that many rural areas and sometimes even urban areas have two kinds of issues. One is connectivity. Internet connection is poor in some places. Secondly, affordability. So as a student or a teacher, they may actually they can potentially buy good quality internet, but they don't have money to buy it. So they buy some low quality internet, and that is kind of very hazy and it doesn't work. And they are losing this whole opportunity to study because of the lack of readiness. So e-readiness is a very, very important factor. All the numbers I told you, all the penetration and all these things I told you, that can happen only if you promote the e-readiness, only if you have more and more people have access to this system. That is again bringing to this topic of digital divide can bring about rising inequality. I think even currently with the COVID issue, one thing that we are talking about is a K-shaped recovery. So the poorer people are going to become even poorer, and the richer people are going to become even richer because of COVID, and that we see all signs of that. Um, Typically, economists hope that the rising richer people are somehow going to spend their money, which is going to at some point raise the poorer people. So the inequality can widen, but if the whole income that the whole pie that is available keeps expanding, then even though you may be very poor, you'll have the basics covered, you'll have the necessities covered. But that may not happen in reality many times. So there is this issue of rising inequality, and that has to be taken into consideration. And there are ways to tackle that. Mainly, if we can provide equal opportunity in terms of digital access to internet and other technologies, that can help address this issue. I think all these issues are quite important for a country like India. And so basically, we look at what to do, what can the governments do, what can companies, industries do, and people at large do. So this is the last slide. I think I'm also approaching the end of the presentation. So there are these basically 6 different priorities. First one is, I talked about digital divide, and that can be addressed by expanding access to ICT, the information and communication technologies. The second thing is payment options. So we have to broaden the various options that are available to people in e-payment. I think in this aspect, India has done a pretty good job. We have a lot of payment, and whenever I visit India, I many times I find that India has more this kind of cashless payment options than like US. In US, it's typically only credit card. If you have a credit card, you can pay. But in India, you have so many other things. Paytm, you can pay using mobile. You don't even need internet. You can pay using your text message. So in India, it's a pretty advanced country in that aspect, even compared to many developed countries. And the third aspect is connectivity infrastructure. How to improve the basically. So it kind of relates to the access to ICT. So how can you improve access to ICT? The way is to expand the infrastructure. How do you make sure that it reaches the last mile, all the internet and the other logistics and delivery infrastructure. Then the other aspect is skill development. This is something I already mentioned. So you have to improve the skills and competence, and so there are two things here. One thing is you get ready people, students, and even industries. They should get ready for the digital revolution, digital skills, and so on. And that in itself can be facilitated by the digital learning environments. So you can for example, you can learn AI, ML, IoT, and all these things sitting at your home, using Coursera or EDX or using the digital technologies, but and then expand. This is a very important aspect. As I mentioned, I gave you the example of these videos, Michael Jackson videos, YouTube, and so on. So there's a lot of disagreement across the world can play a role in this. In terms of regulation, definitely there is a major role of regulation. All these aspects, cyber crimes, consumer against them. So in India, we recently have this consumers charter, and I don't know whether these aspects are there. So these should be important. It's very important to include these things there. And then illegal activities like money laundering should be prevented with proper regulation. Security has and cyber attacks should be prevented. And then finally, the people's personal data privacy should be protected. There has been a lot of discussion about how many of our unique government IDs and so on can be hacked, and privacy can be breached. So those things have to be taken care of. But I would like to add like one last point about regulation. So the regulations should definitely take into account all these pitfalls, but at the same time they should not be so stringent that there is a lack of innovation. So if you really press the throat of or squeeze the throat of the innovators in the digital sector in the name of regulation, if you say you have to take care of all these four basic things, sure, you have to have regulations for that. But if you go beyond that, for example, there are regulations that people have been discussing, and for example in EU there are a lot of regulations which make the digital platforms much more liable than their physical counterparts. So for every small thing, if you say the digital platforms are responsible for that, then what might happen is the kind of growth that we are talking about will not happen, and they may not even innovate. They will not see much productivity improvements and so on. So my kind of conclusion there is that you have to have regulation, and you have to protect consumers. All cyber security should be there, but at the same time, you should also provide room for growth and innovation of these technologies. And many of these are small players. There are many startups in this space, and if they are regulated extensively, they may not even innovate. They may just close down and go away. India in a way is better in this aspect. The regulations are yet to come in India. Some of the really tough regulations, they're yet to come. And as I said, there are pros and cons to regulations, but the lessons, there are a lot of lessons to learn from countries like US and EU. So US is relatively free. There are regulations, whereas EU has a lot. And because of that, the effective environment you see in both countries are quite different. In the US, you see a lot of some of these crimes are pretty severe here, and the privacy is not a big deal in the US. People don't have much privacy because of this lack of regulations. But if you go to EU, there are so many regulations, particularly now they're coming up, and we are yet to see the impact of that. One impact we are already seeing is that companies are being extremely careful to invest in EU, particularly in these sectors, because they know they're going to be grilled a lot by regulators. So I think we can learn all these lessons from other countries and make a wise policy that is acceptable for everyone. So thank you so much again, and I look forward to any thoughts, comments.
Thank you, Dr. Badri, for your excellent overview presentation on the economic situation after COVID, and also highlighting about the digitalization, how it can empower the people, improve the productivity, increase the GDP, and issues related to employment and need for skill development, and certain key problems associated with the digitalization, implementation of digitalization, the risk and challenges, and also highlighting the key actions to be taken in terms of improving the digital economy. I think it has been a overview of presentation brought to us some basic outlines of what needs to be done in the years to come. We are going to keep the floor open for discussion, and I request Mr. Satyanarayan to ask the first question.
Okay, I had already put it up for the.
But anyhow, we thought that you can directly ask the speaker.
But after I put it up, he highlighted. Dr. Badri, I just wanted to know what would be the impact of 5G being launched in India on economy when compared to the other countries.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dave. I did another study on 5G on different countries, including India, and the impact is going to be pretty big because, substantively speaking, a lot of where you have to, for example, maintenance in sector, and many of these kind of very industries which require a lot of I think can you hear me? Yeah. So industries that require a lot of
I think there was some disturbance in your talking. Can you repeat that? Yeah.
Sure. I also realized there's something going on. So I was mentioning that the industries that require a lot of portable kind of devices to facilitate the cloud communication between the cloud and the actual devices, actual machines, and so on. They will benefit heavily from 5G. That is where I was talking about the industrial Internet of Things. So Internet of Things right now is mainly focusing on the mostly on the consumer segment and the digital segment. Example, quality control, quality monitoring, predictive maintenance, many of these things. So we just have this 5G, 5G and collect the information, whatever is happening at the machine level, and we can have big data analytics to see what is happening, which machines require earlier maintenance and later maintenance than scheduled, and so on. And that also can be using sensors and so on. That also can be further automated. So I think in this sense, 5G can be like a game changer for these kind of particular technologies, and a larger penetration of digital sector in manufacturing, which has not been happening in a big way in the past few years. That can get a big boost from 5G, as far as I can see.
So it is basically a big opportunity for basically in India once 5G comes out. in maintenance as well as transporting small and data chunks. That's nice
Yes,
to me.
yes, Mr. Yeah, it's going to be extremely. It's kind of a game-changing technology. Anyway, and yeah, India can get an edge compared to others. Yeah. So I can start answering the questions on the comments. So one question from Mr. Ananta Padmanabhan is, the number is too good to be true. Actually, as I mentioned, there are two factors here. So investment, so I'm not talking, it's not like a Ponzi scheme where you put in some money and then you expect huge returns. But it's more like when you're putting in something like 50, it's actually $50 billion you're putting in as investment. Then first thing that happens is that there is some immediate return of like that whole $50 million itself is a transaction in the economy. So GDP depends on investment is one of the component of GDP. So when you have 50 billion, that 50 billion itself immediately gets added. The remaining 450 billion that we are talking about, that happens from a variety of things. One is that investment is boosting the digital sector itself, this tech sector itself. Second thing is it's increasing productivity across the economy. So it's not only affecting, it's not just a matter of one remote sector that is expanding. It's not like one odd sector that is expanding, but it is expansion of a particular sector that has very high potential of increasing productivity everywhere else. And that is how this 10x kind of number we get at. Like this 10x can be broken down into 3-4 components. So 2, and so we did all this decomposition. We were also quite surprised when we first saw, and it was almost like more than half of it is coming from the productivity effect, because it's going to trigger a lot of productivity, and that is going to be the major exponent here. So it's not like a magic wand, but it is coming from the structural changes that come from these technologies. And then the other question I have got is from
It's an SME.
MSME. Yeah. MSMEs contribute a lot in, are they prepared to face consequences of digital transformation? Yeah, this is a great point, and definitely, like any industry, MSMEs have the both pros and cons coming from digital transformation. The positives are that a lot of the companies that are facilitating this, kind of taking all the technologies emerging from the big tech firms to the last mile, they are going to be startups. So if you take Google and all these big companies, if you take Google, they have this thing called TensorFlow, and this TensorFlow can be used for many startups. Use that to develop their own algorithms. They can develop their own machine learning AI algorithms and so on. So one good thing that big firms are doing is that they're also developing all this infrastructure, all these things, packages and so on, which require a lot of investment. That is actually done by them, and then they are provided to. Then the small firms SMEs can make use of them to take it further. Then of course there is the negative effect, that is the big firms. Recently I was talking to some friends. They were planning to start their small company. To basically during COVID, they wanted to take take all this digital stuff to the what we call as Kirana stores. So go to some small shops and so on, and help them develop their small website or some kind of app and so on. Then they did some research and found that this deal between of that, they're already going to do some of these things because they have this kind of access, and some of these kind of opportunities for startups that may be affected because of the aggressive posturing by the big firms, but the consumers are beneficiaries from that. So it's not overall I wouldn't say it's bad, but for MSMEs it's an issue. So they have to then find out the niche areas where they are not going to face competition from big firms, but they are going to get help from the big firms. So there are so many areas where the big companies are actively promoting startups. For example, Microsoft also has a very active startup ecosystem, kind of incubation, and they have their to use Azure, they help them and so on. So for them also, MSMEs are considered as markets for them, like clients for them. So I think in that sense, MSMEs can benefit from it, and they have to be careful on the issues where they may be affected also. Uh, uh, Another question is about economic growth of gaming industry. I actually am not a expert on that. I haven't done much work on that, but I have looked at some research on this before. Definitely, gaming industry is a pretty high potential industry. There is a lot of growth there. It's an entertainment at the end of the day, and people do spend a lot of money on that. People who are really tuned to that. And there are regulatory systems there also. You have some of the games are kind of like gambling, and there are regulatory systems for that, so that has to be taken into account. But in general, yeah, gaming industry is cool. It can also be used in a positive way. There are gamified learning, gamification of learning, and so on. So those things are also there. There are positive aspects. Then I think there is a follow-up question from Mr. Ananthapadmanabhan on
Can we, Dr. Badri, can you suggest some fast-track actions to bring normalcy to Indian economy?
So I think from a policy point of view, I think a lot of steps have been taken. The first thing is to like the biggest problem now is the demand problem. So people are all losing income, so people are not buying anything, and that is affecting the economy. So if there are like, for example, the government has made sure that a lot of the access to food has been taken care of. A lot of people have been given the adequate food grades and so on. But the there are other aspects, like another suggestion that many experts have given, and I also think is a positive thing, is to give some kind of tax rebate or some kind of immediate relief to the people, to not only poor but also the entire population, and that also to some extent that has been done, some kind of postponing of tax payments and so on. So I think that can have, because basically the disposable income that people may have, that would increase. And then there are structural things to address, and I think some steps the government has taken in the right direction. Make use of this opportunity to push some tough reforms that have been long pending. In a sense, I see this COVID as like every major crisis the world has faced or our country has faced. It has resulted in some major transformation, and that has led to some positive thing in the longer term. So I think a lot of reforms they can be initiated. So I think these are the main things: short term and medium long term things to be done.
Is the 5 trillion GDP achievable as per our plan?
I think right now it is going to be difficult because of the slump we have got now. So we have gone down and then we are coming back. So we are going in a parallel track. So to 5 trillion we are going like this, but now we have come down. So we are going parallelly there. So it's going to take longer time, maybe 2-3 more years. I don't know. I haven't done that extrapolation what may happen, but at least until 2025 we may not be able to achieve 5 trillion. But our revival is going to be pretty strong. So the revival of the growth is going to be strong. But just because 1 year has been so bad, coming back to that path is going to take some time.
Okay. See, the automation and digitalization requires a lot of investment, right? So as a country like India, how are we going to meet the investment requirements?
So the investment, I think there are two things. One is definitely private investment, because all these these are not like kind of a charity kind of investment where you invest and there are no returns. So all the investments, there is going to be productivity improvements, a lot of cost savings are going to happen, so there are going to be returns. So a large amount of this investment is going to come through private sector. So the public sector, what they can do, the banking and so on, they can make sure that there is enough credit flow for this to facilitate the investment. But I don't anticipate huge public investment. Public investment is needed in the things like digital divide. I talked about some areas where you have to, like wherever you need the last mile access, where private investment may not go that far. Private come organically. So that's why all kind of based on organically how much investment is going to be made by private sector and so on. So public sector investment is going to be relatively small than this, and that is mainly to foster equality. So foster access of these technologies to the vulnerable sections of the society.
But unfortunately, some of the government policies are against private investment. And also it is not attracting investment from the private sector, particularly if you take care of the telecom industry. There has been a lot of hue and cry by the telecom service providers. And we are in the process of implementing some of the new technologies like 5G and so. So how are we going to sort of overcome this type of conflicts?
Yeah, I think that is a difficult path to take, and there has to be some cooperation among different policymakers, politicians, industries, and so on. And I also think that our private sector is also pretty. Private sector players are pretty smart. They know how to navigate through the system, how to handle these things. So I'm optimistic on that aspect. There are always challenges when it comes to these, and like you said, there are also controversies created and so on. And some of the controversies are true and they have to be addressed, but there are others that may be rumors. So you have to differentiate between them, and you have to address the genuine ones and discard the others.
Yeah. Dr. Dave, would you like to carry on? Dr. Dave? You have to unmute.
I'm sorry, you told Dr. Dave. I'm not a doctor here.
Yeah, okay.
NR Dave is here. So that is it for me, basically. I think if in case you can give me some time, I'll like myself to get excused. I have a couple of people waiting to me. It was very nice to hear you, Dr. Badri, and very promising here. Thank you, Mr. Mohan, for the thing, and thank you, Mr. Sakthivel and Mr. Subramanian.
Yeah, we are also winding up. We are also winding up in 2 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Sakthivel?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Dave.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon to all of you. On behalf of the Computer Society of India Chennai chapter, IEEE Computer Society Madras chapter, ACM Chennai Professional chapter, and Hindustan Chamber of Commerce, we would like to thank today's webinar speaker, Dr. Satyanarayan Gopalakrishnan, Director and Senior Economist, University of Washington, Seattle, for his excellent and informative lecture on role of digitalization in economic revival. Thank you very much, sir. We would like to thank Mr. Satyanarayan Dave, President, Hindustan Chamber of Commerce, Mr. H.R. Mohan, Chairman, ACM Chennai Professional Chapter, Mr. P.V. Subramanian, Chairman, Computer Society of India Chennai Chapter, and Dr. Ahila, Managing Committee Member, Computer Society of India Chennai Chapter, members of all the societies and office bearers of all the 4 organizations, and the participants of this today webinar. Thank you, Ananda. Thank you very much for being with us. And finally, I would like to thank all the participants who have joined to virtual platform like Google Meet and YouTube. So, thank you, Ananda. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Dr. Sakthivel. And once again, thanks to Dr. Badri for our, on behalf of our various societies, which are organized. And as usual, it has been a wonderful presentation and trying to give you some clarity on the economic situation and what best needs to be done and things like that. So once again, our sincere thanks. And we look forward for our continued relationship. And before we formally wind up our today's session, we have two announcements regarding our forthcoming program. One is on 23rd, we have a program on open data for sustainability. So it is going to be delivered by Dr. Neha, the ACM distinguished speaker. And on 30th, we have artificial intelligence for societal good. So this again going to be how the technology, artificial intelligence is going to be used for improving the societal actions. And invitation for both these programs have been already mailed to our members and other groups. Please do register and attend this program without fail. So thank you very much for your joining this program and make this a wonderful event. So with this, we would like to formally close the meeting. Thank you very much and good day to all. And good night to Dr. Badri.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. Yeah.
Okay, we can recording close பண்ணிக்கலாம்.